I stared at our last $87, enough for rent. I made a choice that night to give it all away, unaware it would lead to an eviction notice and ignite a city. It was the loneliest sound in the world, the crinkle of my last $87. The bills were worn soft, folded and refolded so many times the faces of the presidents were blurred into sad green ghosts. This wasn't just money. This was rent. This was the difference between keeping the small, second-floor apartment my little brother and I called home, and facing the cold, indifferent smile of our landlord, Mr. Henderson. The eviction notice wasn't a piece of paper. It was a ghost haunting our doorway, a constant reminder that we were living on a knife's edge. My laptop screen glowed in the dark, the donation page for the Beacon Collective a stark white beacon against the gloom. "Help us amplify our voices," the headline read. Below it, a progress bar was stuck at a frustrating 70%. They needed a permit for the march on Saturday. They needed banners, water for the volunteers, a basic first aid station. They needed this money to protest the very thing that had hollowed out my brother's eyes and stolen his laughter. Just last week, my brother Jamal, all of 16 years old with a sketchbook full of superheroes and a future brighter than the sun, was arrested. His crime? Sitting on a park bench in the wrong neighborhood after dark. He and his friends were just talking, sharing a bag of chips, but a resident called the police reporting suspicious activity. The word suspicious hung in the air like poison. When I saw him at the station, a bruise blooming on his cheek from being pushed against the squad car, something inside me shattered. He wasn't the same kid who left the house that evening. The light was gone. He'd stopped drawing. His sketchbook lay on his nightstand, collecting dust like a tombstone. And so here I was, staring at $87 and an impossible choice. My mother's voice, a memory I clung to like a life raft, whispered in my ear about responsibility, about keeping a roof over our heads. "You're the grown-up now, Imani. You have to be the practical one." But then I'd see Jamal's face, the shame and fear that had replaced his easy grin, and a different voice, a fiery, furious one, would roar to life in my chest. What good was a roof over our heads if we weren't safe outside our own door? What was the point of being practical when the world was so profoundly, cruelly impractical? The Beacon Collective was our only hope. They were a small, local group, but they had heart. Their leader, Marcus, had looked me right in the eye at their last meeting and said, "We fight for the Jamals of this city. We will not let them be erased." His words had been a spark in the suffocating darkness. They were planning to march right past the police precinct, right through the center of downtown, to make a noise so loud it couldn't be ignored. They needed $3,000 for the permit and supplies. They were so close. My cursor hovered over the donation box. I typed in the number, 87. My fingers trembled. I could almost feel Mr. Henderson's heavy footsteps on the stairs. I could picture the lock on our door being changed, our meager belongings piled on the curb. This was insane. It was a reckless, foolish gamble. I was sacrificing our immediate safety for the faint hope of a better future. And for what? For a principle? I looked over at the couch where Jamal was asleep, his face tense even in his dreams. He flinched, a small whimper escaping his lips. That was it. That was the only push I needed. My responsibility wasn't just to the roof and the walls, but to the boy sleeping under them. It was my job to try and fix the world that was breaking him. With a deep, shuddering breath, I clicked the Donate Now button. The screen changed to a simple, "Thank you" message. $87. Gone. A wave of pure terror washed over me, so intense it made me dizzy. What have I done? I closed the laptop, the sudden silence of the room deafening. For a moment nothing happened. The world didn't end. The floor didn't swallow me whole. A strange sense of calm, almost defiant peace began to settle in my chest. I did something. It might not be enough, but it wasn't nothing. My phone, sitting on the coffee table, buzzed. My heart leapt into my throat. I snatched it up, hoping it was a message from Marcus, maybe a notification that my donation had pushed them over the top. My screen lit up with a text message. It wasn't from Marcus. It was from a number I knew by heart, a number that always made my stomach clench. It was from Mr. Henderson. My blood ran cold as I read the 2 short sentences that had just sealed my fate. Imani, the rent was due at 5 p.m. I'll be by in the morning with the final notice. The phone slipped from my numb fingers, clattering onto the floor. For a long moment I just stared at it, at the glowing screen that had just pronounced our doom. $87. I had traded our home for a digital thank you and a principal. The defiant peace I'd felt moments before shattered like glass, replaced by a cold, sharp-edged panic that clawed its way up my throat. I wanted to scream, to rewind time, to snatch the money back from the anonymous digital ether. But I couldn't. The only sound in the apartment was Jamal's soft, troubled breathing from the couch. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old building, every distant siren sounded like Mr. Henderson's footsteps coming to throw us out into the street. I spent the night staring at the ceiling, my mind a frantic whirlwind of impossible plans. Could I call my aunt? No, she was barely scraping by herself. Could I find a shelter? The thought of taking Jamal to a place like that, of seeing the last flicker of hope in his eyes extinguish, was unbearable. By the time the gray morning light filtered through our thin curtains, I felt hollowed out, an empty shell of exhaustion and dread. I made breakfast on autopilot, forcing a smile when Jamal shuffled into the kitchen. He didn't seem to notice. He just picked at his toast, his gaze distant. The bruise on his cheek had faded to a sickly yellow-green, a permanent reminder of the night that had changed him. I wanted to tell him, to confess what I'd done, but the words were lodged in my throat. How could I tell my little brother I had gambled away our home? At precisely 9 a.m. the knock came. It was sharp, firm, and final. I opened the door to find Mr. Henderson standing there, his face a mask of weary indifference. He wasn't a monster, just a man who saw us as a number in a ledger, a problem to be solved. "Imani," he said, not unkindly, "you know I can't keep waiting. I have my own bills." "I know, Mr. Henderson," I whispered, my voice barely audible. I need a little more time." He shook his head, pulling a folded document from his jacket pocket. "This is the official notice. It gives you 24 hours. He handed it to me. The paper felt heavy as a cinder block in my hand. "The locks will be changed tomorrow at noon. I'm sorry it came to this." He wasn't sorry. He was just done. He turned and walked away without another word. I closed the door, leaning against it as my legs threatened to give out. 24 hours. My phone started buzzing, a frantic, insistent vibration against the door. I almost ignored it, assuming it was another reminder of a bill I couldn't pay. But it kept going. Annoyed, I pulled it out of my pocket. The name on the screen read, Marcus Beacon. My heart hammered against my ribs. I swiped to answer, my hand trembling. "Hello? Imani? It's Marcus. From the Beacon Collective. Did I catch you at a bad time?" His voice was electric, buzzing with an energy that felt alien in my silent, despairing apartment. No. It's okay. What is it? What is it?" He laughed, a deep, booming sound. "Imani, what you did last night. It was incredible. Your donation, that specific $87, it pushed us over the $3,000 mark at exactly 11:59 p.m. It triggered an automatic email to our entire mailing list saying we'd met our goal just before the midnight deadline. I sank onto the floor, the eviction notice crinkling in my hand. "Oh, that's great, Marcus." The words tasted like ash. "Great? It's a miracle," he continued, oblivious to my turmoil. "People woke up to that email this morning, saw that we'd made it by the skin of our teeth, and the story just caught fire. Donations have been pouring in all morning. But that's not why I'm calling. Imani, I saw your name on the donation list. I know who you are. Your brother is Jamal, right?" "Yes," I breathed. "We've been trying to bring attention to his case for a week. When I saw your name, it all clicked. The timing, the amount. You gave us your last dime, didn't you?" The line went quiet for a second. His voice was softer when he spoke again. "Your story, Imani. It's the heart of why we're doing this. It's everything. Can you meet me? Right now? It's important. We have a chance to do something big here, bigger than just the march. Hope is a dangerous thing. It flickers to life just when you think you've accepted the darkness. He was offering me a lifeline, a different narrative than the one of failure and eviction I was drowning in. "Where?" I asked, my voice cracking. He gave me an address downtown, an office above a barber shop. "Come as fast as you can. You've already started the fire. Now I need you to help us fan the flames." He hung up. I stared at the eviction notice, then at the door. I had 24 hours until my life fell apart. 24 hours of shame and packing and figuring out where to go. Or I could use the next hour to chase this one, insane, impossible spark of hope. I stood up, tucked the notice into my back pocket, and walked to the living room. "Jamal," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I have to go out for a little bit. It's about the march, the one for you." For the first time all morning he looked at me, really looked at me. A flicker of something curiosity, confusion, crossed his face. "Okay," he said softly. I ran half the way there, my lungs burning, Marcus's words echoing in my head. "You've already started the fire." When I got to the address, I saw a narrow staircase tucked between the barber shop and a laundromat. I climbed the rickety steps, my heart pounding with a strange mix of terror and anticipation. The door at the top was slightly ajar, and I could hear the low murmur of voices from inside. I pushed it open. The room was small, cramped, and blindingly bright. It was filled with people, not just the handful of activists I was expecting, but reporters holding microphones and cameramen with massive lenses pointed toward the back of the room. At a small makeshift podium stood Marcus. He saw me in the doorway, and a huge, relieved smile broke across his face. He lifted his hand and pointed directly at me. "And speak of the devil," his voice boomed, amplified by the microphones. "Here she is now." Every head, every camera, every bright light in the room swiveled to face me, pinning me in the doorway. "Everyone," Marcus announced, his voice ringing with triumph, "I'd like you to meet Imani Carter, the woman whose last $87 is about to change this entire city." I froze, caught in the blinding glare of the camera lights like a deer on a highway. The air crackled with the sound of a dozen camera shutters clicking at once. It was a physical assault, a wave of noise and light that made my head swim. My first instinct was to turn and run, to flee back down the rickety stairs to the anonymity of my collapsing life. But Marcus was looking at me, his eyes blazing with an intensity that rooted me to the spot. He was holding up a hand to quiet the room, but his gaze never left mine. It wasn't a request, it was a plea. "Stay. Trust me." A reporter from a local news station, a woman with sharp eyes and perfectly coiffed hair, pushed her microphone towards my face. "Miss Carter, is it true? Did you really donate the last of your rent money to fund the protest?" My mouth was dry. I couldn't form a single word. I just nodded, a tiny, jerky movement. The room erupted again. Questions were being shouted from every direction. "Why did you do it? What's your connection to the cause? What do you have to say to the police department?" It was a chaotic symphony of demands, and I was the terrified, unprepared conductor. Marcus stepped forward, placing a steadying hand on my shoulder and guiding me towards the podium. He leaned into the cluster of microphones. All right, everybody. Give her a second. She didn't come here expecting a press conference." He turned to me, his voice a low murmur only I could hear. "Just tell them your story, Imani. Tell them about Jamal. Tell them why you did it. The truth is all we need." I looked out at the sea of expectant faces, the unblinking eyes of the cameras. This was so much bigger than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just about a protest permit anymore. This was my eviction notice, my brother's bruised face, my quiet despair being broadcast for the entire city to see. A wave of anger, hot and clarifying, washed over me, burning away the fear. They wanted a story? I'd give them a story. I took a deep breath, gripping the sides of the podium to steady my shaking hands. "My name is Imani Carter," I said, my voice surprisingly clear and strong. And yes, I gave the Beacon Collective my last $87. It was our rent money. A hush fell over the room. I didn't do it because I'm a hero. I did it because my 16-year-old brother, Jamal, was arrested last week for sitting on a park bench. He's a good kid, He loves to draw superheroes. He's never been in trouble in his life. But he was in the wrong neighborhood, so a resident called the police about suspicious activity. I let the words hang in the air. He came home from the station with a bruise on his face and the light gone from his eyes. He hasn't picked up his sketchbook since. I could see the reporters scribbling furiously in their notebooks. The woman with the perfect hair looked genuinely moved. The world broke my brother that night, I continued, my voice thick with emotion. It told him that the color of his skin makes him suspicious. It told him that he doesn't belong. I gave that money because I am tired of my brother being afraid to exist. I am tired of having to be practical in a world that is fundamentally unfair. What good is a roof over our heads if we aren't safe the moment we step out from under it? So yes, I gave our rent money. And now my brother and I are being evicted. We have until noon tomorrow to get out. The room was utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The reporters weren't just reporters anymore. They were people, listening, their professional masks slipping. The march on Saturday isn't just about a permit and some banners, I said, my voice rising with passion. It's about Jamal. It's about every other Jamal in this city who has been made to feel small, afraid, and worthless. We are marching to say that our children's lives are worth more than $87. They are priceless. When I finished, no one spoke. Then a single person in the back of the room started clapping. A slow, steady clap. It was joined by another, then another, until the entire room was filled with applause. The flashbulbs were blinding. Marcus squeezed my shoulder, his face a mixture of pride and awe. "You did it, Imani," he whispered. "You gave them the heart." The next few hours were a blur. My phone, which had been silent with dread all morning, began to explode. News alerts with my name and face on them. Messages from strangers offering support, offering money, offering a place to stay. An online fundraiser Marcus had set up while I was speaking had already raised over $10,000. It was surreal, overwhelming. I felt like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. By late afternoon, Marcus drove me home. As we pulled onto my street, my breath caught in my throat. The block, normally quiet at this time of day, was anything but. A news van was parked across the street. A small crowd of people neighbors, activists I recognized from Beacon meetings, and complete strangers were gathered on the sidewalk in front of my apartment building. They were holding handmade signs. "We stand with Imani. Justice for Jamal. My rent for your rights." And standing at the foot of my apartment steps, looking bewildered and surrounded by several people patting him on the shoulder, was my brother, Jamal. He looked up as I got out of the car, his eyes wide. He was holding his sketchbook, but my eyes were drawn past him, to the figure standing on the top step, arguing heatedly with a woman from the crowd. It was Mr. Henderson. He looked stressed, cornered, his usual indifference replaced by a flustered anger. He saw me, and his face hardened. He pushed through the small crowd and stomped over to me, waving a piece of paper in his hand. It wasn't my eviction notice. It was a check. "Take it," he hissed, trying to shove it into my hand, his voice low and furious so only I could hear. "Just take it and make them go away. A TV crew showed up at my house. My wife is furious. This is a nightmare." The check was made out to me. The amount written on it was for $5,000. I stared at him, then at the check, then at the crowd of people who had shown up to support me. This was more than I could have ever dreamed. The money to stop the eviction, to have a cushion, to finally breathe. It was right here, in my hand. But then I looked at his face, at the anger and resentment, the desire to just make the problem, to make me disappear. This wasn't a solution. It was a payoff. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the noise of the crowd. A low rumble that grew steadily louder, coming from the end of the street. Everyone turned to look. A single police car was approaching slowly. It didn't have its sirens on, but the flashing lights painted the street in unsettling strokes of red and blue. It pulled to a stop right in front of my building. 2 officers got out. They weren't looking at the crowd. They were looking directly at me. The taller of the 2 officers strode forward, his hand resting on his hip. His face was grim, unreadable. He stopped a few feet away from me and Mr. Henderson. "Imani Carter?" he asked, his voice flat and official. "Yes?" I whispered, my heart plummeting into my stomach. He didn't look at the crowd or the news camera that was now filming him. He just looked at me. "You need to come with us. We have a warrant for your arrest." The world tilted on its axis. Arrest? The word was a foreign object in my mouth, sharp and metallic. A warrant for what? The officer's expression didn't change. Incitement to public disturbance. And we have a complaint from a Mr. Henderson regarding harassment and solicitation of funds under false pretenses. My head whipped around to look at my landlord. Mr. Henderson wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stood there, clutching his useless check, his face pale and clammy. He had called the police on me. After trying to buy my silence, he had decided to bury me instead. The crowd gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the air from the street. A low, angry murmur started to ripple through them. Marcus immediately stepped between me and the officers. "On what grounds?" Marcus demanded, his voice calm but laced with steel. This woman was exercising her right to free speech. "And harassment? Look around you, officer. This is a peaceful assembly." "That's for a judge to decide," the officer replied, his gaze still fixed on me. "Ma'am, please put your hands behind your back." This couldn't be happening. I had fought back, I had spoken out, and this was my reward. A pair of handcuffs? I looked past the officer's stony face to my brother. Jamal was standing frozen on the steps, his sketchbook clutched to his chest like a shield. The fear was back in his eyes, stark and terrible. The very same fear I had sacrificed everything to fight. In that moment, something inside me snapped. The fear, the panic, it all evaporated, replaced by a cold, diamond-hard resolve. They would not do this. They would not break another one of us in front of our own home. "No," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the murmurs of the crowd. The officer's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "I said no," I repeated, taking a small step forward. I could feel Marcus's hand on my arm, trying to pull me back, but I shook it off. "You are not putting me in handcuffs. You are not going to arrest me for telling the truth." I pointed a trembling finger at Mr. Henderson. "And you are not going to let this man use you to silence me after he tried to pay me off." The news camera that had been filming from a distance was now right there, its lens a huge, unblinking eye just a few feet away. The reporter was holding her microphone out, capturing every word. The officer took a step towards me, his hand moving from his hip towards his cuffs. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult." But before he could reach me, the crowd surged forward. Not violently, but with a quiet, undeniable force. They formed a human wall around me, my neighbors, the activists, the strangers who had read my story. An older woman who lived down the hall, Mrs. Gable, stood right in front of me, her frail body a surprisingly solid barrier. "You'll have to arrest all of us," she said, her voice shaking but firm. The officers were outnumbered, caught off guard by the sudden, united front of a quiet residential street. Their expressions shifted from authoritative to uncertain. The taller officer spoke into his radio, his voice a low, urgent mumble. Just then, a sleek black car pulled up behind the police cruiser. A woman in a sharp business suit got out. She had an air of authority that made even the police officers pause. She strode through the crowd, which parted for her like the Red Sea. "Officers," she said, her voice crisp and commanding. "I'm Eleanor Vance. I'm Miss Carter's legal counsel." She handed each of them a business card. I had never seen this woman before in my life. "I would strongly advise you to check the validity of that warrant and the credibility of your complainant before you proceed. My client has just become the face of a city-wide movement against wrongful arrest and intimidation. Arresting her now, on these flimsy charges, in front of a news crew? That would be unwise." She turned to me and gave me a small, reassuring smile. "Don't worry, we've got this." She gestured towards the crowd. "The entire city has got this." The officers exchanged a long look. The reality of the situation was dawning on them. The camera, the crowd, the high-powered lawyer who had appeared out of nowhere. The taller one finally gave a curt nod. We'll stand by. They retreated to their car, not leaving but watching. The tension broke. The crowd let out a cheer that echoed down the block. Eleanor Vance turned to Mr. Henderson, her smile gone. "As for you," she said, her voice dropping to an icy calm, "I believe we have a lot to discuss, starting with attempted bribery and filing a false police report." Mr. Henderson looked like he was about to be sick. He turned and practically ran to his car, fumbling with his keys before speeding away down the street. The next 24 hours were the most surreal of my life. The story exploded. My arrest attempt, broadcast live, was the final spark on a mountain of kindling. The mayor's office issued a statement promising a full review of the Jamal case and the tactics of the precinct involved. The online fundraiser didn't just grow, it went supernova, reaching a staggering $250,000. Eleanor Vance, it turned out, was a pro bono lawyer from a major downtown firm who had seen my press conference and driven straight to my apartment. She not only handled the bogus warrant, which was dropped by morning, but also helped me place the donated funds into a trust for Jamal and myself. We wouldn't have to worry about rent for a very long time. On Saturday morning, I stood with Marcus on a makeshift stage in the city's central plaza. The march wasn't just the few hundred people we had hoped for. The streets were a roaring river of humanity. Tens of thousands of people from every neighborhood, every race, every walk of life had shown up. They carried professionally printed banners with my words on them. "Our children are priceless." They chanted Jamal's name, and standing right beside me, holding a microphone of his own, was my brother. He looked out at the vast sea of faces, and for the first time in weeks, he smiled. A true, brilliant smile that reached his eyes. When it was his turn to speak, he didn't talk about his arrest or his fear. He just held up his sketchbook, now filled with new drawings. Superheroes of all colors, standing together, protecting a city. "My sister told you I like to draw superheroes," he said, his voice ringing out over the massive crowd. "But I was wrong. I was drawing them all wrong. They don't wear capes. They look like you. They look like my sister. They look like all of us." The roar from the crowd was deafening. It was the sound of a city changing. As I stood there, looking at my brother, whole and bright again, I thought about that crumpled, lonely $87. It wasn't a gamble. It was an investment. I had traded a roof for a foundation, a key for a movement. I had lost our home, and in return, we had found a community, a voice, and a future. And that was a home no one could ever evict us from.